What's up guys, Matt with BleepinJeep, everything off-road, none of the boring stuff. I recently put 37-inch tires on the wife's JL, and after that upgrade, it was time for a brake upgrade. Of course, when you get bigger tires, all kinds of other problems arise, and one of those is you need bigger brakes. So today, we're going to put on a kit from Powerstop brakes. This is the Z36 kit for truck and towing. One of the things I want to do with this JL once I get it built is build a trailer for it and take it all to the Rubicon. So these brakes are really going to help me in that situation, towing a trailer on and off-road. So this kit I got came with the calipers, the rotors, the pads, the brake lines, everything. It's going to replace the entire brake system. What I thought was ironic is there's a Jeep Cherokee right on the front of the box. So the first thing I'm going to do is go out on a straight section of road and paint a line, and that's where I'm going to do my first tests on the stock brakes. Once I stop, I'm going to open the door and we're going to mark another line, and then we'll measure at the end, and we'll also compare with the new brakes. So here's me doing a couple of tests. This is what it looks like from the side and from the bottom. It's actually a very quick stop. You can't tell by the video, but the tires are chirping. Now, there seems to be a problem with this cannon, as you saw right there. I didn't notice it at first. That thing is making a mess. I was having all kinds of trouble with that can, and ended up getting paint all over myself. And hopefully I get this cleaned up before the wife sees it, but all over the door as well. So now I'm going to take a tape measure, and it took 2 times to do this, but you can see right there 29, and the first measurement was 30, so that's 59 feet on average out of the 3 stops that I did. Next, we're going to jack up the vehicle, or the Jeep, and we're going to put it on jack stands and take off the wheels and tires and get ready to do the new brakes. And as you can see, don't let those tires just roll around on their own, or they'll take out all your camera equipment. Next, grab a bucket. And keep in mind you can move the steering wheel back and forth to get a better angle to help you work on this. And so I'm going to turn the wheel all the way to the right. We're going to work on the front driver's side first. And if you need to, you can use a clamp and clamp this down, and that'll just make it easier for you to pull off. You also might want to open the reservoir, because when you clamp that down, the brake fluid has to go somewhere, and you want it to be able to come up at least and let some of the air out. Now take that and set it on your bucket, and next we're going to take off the brake pads. As you can see, these have about 35,000 miles on them, but they look relatively good for what they are, for how many miles they have. Next we're going to take off the bracket, and we're just going to buzz those off with the impact. Actually, they're on there really tight, so you might need to get out the breaker bar and break those loose. There we go. Now, take off that factory bracket, and we're going to remove this little guy here, which is kind of a neat addition that just keeps the rotor in place while you're working on the brakes. And we're going to take that off. If you need to, clean it up with a wire brush, get some rust off of there. This was actually pretty clean, so I didn't need to do that much. And then we're going to install the new Powerstop rotors and put that little holding piece in there. And these are the new calipers. Make sure you have the right side, or the correct side. You want to make sure that the air vent or the bleeder is on the top, never on the bottom, because you want that air to come out of the top, because air rises. Now take that apart, and we're going to put the bracket up here back with the stock bolts, and we're going to bolt that down and tighten it as tight as you can get it with the breaker bar. This is Redneck torque pounds. Next, we're going to put the little clips in place. These are what's going to hold the brake pads themselves, and the brake pads will slide back and forth on those little clips. Now, Powerstop gives you a little bit of grease, and you can put this on anywhere that the brake pads touch, and so that they won't make a lot of noise or chatter while they're sliding back and forth. Here is the brake pad itself. Make sure you align it appropriately. You can see it's going to fit the caliper, and you're just going to slide that in and it'll pop right in. I found it was easier to actually put this grease on the brake pads themselves. That way you get it all coated. And of course you want to grease your slides. However, these came pre-greased from the factory, so just make sure that those slide back and forth easily. And then we're going to put the caliper itself on with the new hardware. Now tighten that down good. I like to use a standard wrench, a socket wrench, and you're going to have to hold the back side in this case. I don't like to use an impact on this because I just want to get a feel for how tight they are. And you can use Loctite on that if you'd like. I think there was a little bit pre-installed or pre-assembled in there. Now we're going to put the brake line in, and you're going to need to take the old brake line off, and it comes with this little bracket, and the wheel speed sensors are attached to that bracket as well, so you're going to need to separate the two. So take out this bolt and then get your little clip tool or a screwdriver and just pop these loose. Now remove everything out of the way so that you can get to the actual brake line itself, which is right there, and you're going to take a 12mm wrench. Hopefully you have a line wrench, that helps, and be very, very careful with that line because you don't want to mess it up. So once you get that broken loose, you're going to pop out that little clip right there, and the brake line will come out. There's going to be brake fluid going everywhere on this first one. Don't worry about that, just try to catch it all in your bucket. And then we're going to put the new brake line in. We're going to attach it with that little bolt. Now your banjo bolt is going to get a copper washer, then it's going to go through the brake line. Make sure you orientate that in the correct orientation, and then you're going to put another copper washer on it as well. Now this line is a prototype. I actually got the very first JL prototype brake kit ever made by Powerstop Brakes, so I've asked them to change the orientation of that line. So yours may look a little bit different because of the way it comes out of the brake line, but whichever way you do it, make sure that it's not going to interfere with the tire. Now push your new brake line through. You're going to install this little clip on here. Make sure you do not cross thread it, and then put everything back in place just the way you found it. Make sure everything's good and tight, and we'll check for leaks later on. Now I'm going to take a zip tie, and I'm going to zip tie the brake line and everything back up to this arm. The brake line did have a metal bracket on it, just like the factory brake line, but I cut it off because I'm dealing with an aftermarket suspension here, so this arm doesn't have a place to bolt that bracket to. So I just am going to cut it off and zip tie it. And if you're really good, you can get that zip tie to stay right there on the drive shaft. Alright, this is what you're going to end up with. It should look just like this. Beautiful. And then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. If you're good, you can do it just as quickly as that and end up with beauty on the other side as well. Now if you've got fingerprints and goo on there, make sure to hit that with some brake cleaner just to wash off any imperfections, and then we'll start on the rear. We're going to jack it up, put some jack stands under there, take off the rear wheels and tires, and we're ready to go, just like the front. So the rear is very, very similar to the front, so I'm going to speed through it just a little bit quicker. The first thing that you're going to do is take the brakes apart and off, just like we did before. Actually, What I realized once I did the rear is that you can take this whole assembly apart together if you want. That way you don't have to take the two pieces, the caliper apart from the caliper bracket there. And then we're going to do the same thing like on the front. We're going to take the wheel speed sensor apart. We're going to take the brake line off and set it aside. And then we're going to take the rotor off. Make sure you hit this with a can of brake cleaner while you're in here. You want to get all that dust off from the parking brake and just any grime that's accumulated in there. And then make sure you have the correct rotor. Powerstop makes this really easy because they label the rotors, so there's no guesswork involved. We're going to put that on, secure it in place with that little bolt, and then grab your bracket, and we're going to put that on and tighten it down as tight as I can get it. Next up, we're going to do the bottom as tight as I can get it. We're going to put these little brackets in here, or these little clips, and then we're going to put the brake pads in after we grease the edges, just like so. Put your other brake pad in, and then we're going to put the caliper on. We're going to tighten that down, not as tight as I can get it, just as tight as you feel comfortable, and it's going to move back and forth, and that is the way it should be. It should slide easily on those slides. Next, we're going to install the brake line. It comes with the factory bracket already attached on this red stainless steel rubber coated line. We're going to put our washers on and tighten that down as well. We're going to take off now the factory brake line, being very careful not to mess it up. Install the new brake line and put the clip in, and then if you feel like it, you can add some zip ties to connect the brake line back with the wheel speed sensor wires, and then clean it off with some brake fluid. And now you may think that you're done, but we still have a little ways to go yet. So we're going to use .3 brake fluid, and make sure you've probably lost a lot of brake fluid in this process, so you want to fill this back up, and don't do like I just did and fill it too quickly and spill it. Now we're going to get a clear tube, works best, and we're going to put it in a bottle or a jar, and I find it helpful if you tape it to it so you're not trying to deal with a mess and this flopping around and falling out everywhere and spilling brake fluid all over your floor. Now you're going to get your lovely, beautiful assistant to help you out. And this is my wife, and she's going to help us bleed the brakes. So next, we're going to take off that little rubber cap. You're going to get you a wrench and put it on before the hose, and then put your hose on there. Make sure it's really tight. You want it to be airtight so that we don't introduce any air into the system. Now, crack open the bleeder valve, and you want to do this on the farthest away from the master cylinder, so we're going to be working on the right rear. And then have your assistant pump the brakes a bunch of times until you see fluid come out, and then close it off. Now we're going to start the bleeding process, so she's going to do 1, 2, 3 holding, and then you're going to crack open the line, let some fluid come out, and then close it again, and then we're going to repeat 1, 2, 3 holding, and then crack open the line and stop the line, close the line, and then we're going to repeat that probably 3 or 4 times on each side. And then we're going to move to the driver rear. We're going to do it again, 1, 2, 3 holding, crack open the line, and then close off the line. Repeat that about 4 times. If you see any air bubbles, keep repeating. And then we're going to do that on the front passenger and then the front driver. Now make sure that you keep checking the levels, because you never want to let this run dry and introduce air into the system. So keep checking that level and keep topping off. Then we're going to repeat the whole process again, starting at the back right, the back left, the front right, and then the front left. Since these are brand new calipers that have had no fluid in them previously, I want to make sure that I get all of the air out of the system. So we're going to repeat the entire process 3 or 4 times on each side, go all the way around, and then repeat that again, the entire process all the way around. And then once you're done, you can celebrate properly with a good dance-off.
Are you ready? 5 at 40 to 10 and 5 at 35 to 5, and then drive. That's what we're gonna do.
So what does that mean? Well, this step is very important. You want to properly seat the brakes or bed them in. So what you're going to do is, hopefully without any stop lights or stop signs, you're going to go from 40 miles an hour to 10 miles an hour 5 times, and then from 35 miles an hour to 5 miles an hour 5 times. Trying to do this without ever coming to a complete stop.
Neighbors probably think I'm nuts.
Yes, your neighbors are going to think that you're crazy, but just try to get it done. After those stops, or almost stops, then you're going to drive around for at least 5 minutes, letting your brakes cool off, more if you can, while never hitting the brakes. Alright, so I let them cool off, and now we're going to try our experiment once again. 40 miles an hour, coming to a complete stop as quickly as I feel comfortable. Then I'm going to open the door and make a little mark on the pavement. These people probably think I'm crazy as well. Trying to do this in your neighborhood is not a good idea. As you can see, the tires are chirping there, and I made 3 stops and marked them out on pavement. You can see the tires locking down and the suspension sucking in. Now, let's get out the measuring tape, and you can see that it's about, on average, 8 feet shorter, which for a 40 mile an hour test, I think that 8 feet is pretty good. But I think there's a lot more to it than just the stopping distance. These brakes are drilled and slotted. They're going to stay cool longer, and that's going to help them keep from warping. Not only that, but the pads themselves are made up of a better material, and I think overall they're just going to last and perform much better than factory. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/BleepinJeep. There you'll find perks for becoming a member, like t-shirts, stickers, and early access to videos like this one. We'll see you next time, guys.